Hey y'all, our narrative lectionary reading for this upcoming Sunday is from 2 Kings 22, verse 1 through 10. This is the story of Josiah. Josiah became king when he was just 8 years old, made huge reforms, took a nation that had had terrible kings for several generations and said, you know what, we're gonna change this. We're gonna start by clearing the temple out and cleaning it up. And while they were cleaning it up, they found one of the books of Moses. A lot of people think it was probably Deuteronomy or a portion of Deuteronomy, and realized like we're not doing any of the things we're supposed to. It would have been super easy to just hide the book at that point, but he didn't. And so you've got the story of reform. And as I was reading it, what it really made me think of is we have this idea in our culture that we inherit the sins of the parents. And this is scriptural too. You find this in Deuteronomy as well. Right where you've got the Ten Commandments, you've got this idea where, the scriptures say that the sin of the parents visit 3 or 4 generations. And we remember that part of the scripture, but we don't remember what comes right after that, where it says, but God's love will visit thousands of generations. And so it's really the statement of hope mixed with the statement of truth. The statement of truth is, if my mom is an alcoholic, then I'm more likely to become an alcoholic because I grew up with that and I inherited genes. Like, that's just a truth. We've really discovered that scientifically, that alcoholism is something that people inherit. Not to mention the environment you live in. If you grow up in an environment where your parents bicker with each other and they yell at each other, you're more likely to communicate through shouting yourself. This is kind of the nature of the world that we live in. We inherit the sin of the people around us. However, essentially what God is saying is, but you don't have to, because my love will free you and my love will visit thousands of generations. And it's far more powerful than this generational curse that you may receive. And so Josiah, coming from generations of evil kings, has decided as an 8-year-old that he's going to clean the temple up, and he's not going to live the way that they used to. And I think there's great hope in this story, and there's great hope in our own stories. I know many of the people that listen to this are people who are preparing sermons themselves. And so what I would encourage you to talk about this week is to think about a time in your life where you realize that you could have inherited your parents' sins. You could have done things the way they had, but somehow God pulled you out of that, and you didn't inherit that. I come from generations of folks who struggled with alcoholism, and I have bottles of beer and cider and alcohol in my home that sits there for years, and I never touch it. And I drink occasionally, but I don't have a desire for it. I have every reason that I could have or should have. But God freed me of that. I have many other stories similar to that, but I want to be mindful of my parents' privacy as I talk about generations of curses in that sense. So, just as you're preaching about this, or as you're thinking about the scripture yourself, I encourage you to think about the hope and the fact that God will free us from those generational curses. I also was struck by this idea of feedback. Josiah could have hidden the scriptures or could have ignored them, and nobody would have known any different. And it's not like this was a small change either. They realized they had been doing worship all wrong. They had their life was not revolving around the practices of Moses the way they should have. So this isn't as simple as celebrating a new holiday. Like, he was talking about making complete reform in the way that the nation was celebrating and practicing worship. And it's in this setting that he said, no, you know what? We're going to do it the right way, even if it's hard. And that's what feedback's like. I learned when I did wilderness therapy, we had to learn to receive feedback. And when you first start receiving feedback, the only thing you're allowed to say, no matter what the feedback is thank you. And it was super hard. Like, I remember receiving feedback to this day that I would say it was inaccurate, and it was the emotions of the other people who were giving me feedback that was really coming out, and they were lashing out at me. But I learned how to take that and say thank you, and filter through it afterwards when my own brain wasn't trying to defend myself, to think about that afterwards and say, okay, does this apply? Does it not apply? And in that setting, I learned to apply things that sometimes were really hard to hear. And in the moment, I would have been defensive. But because I had learned to just say thank you to the feedback, to accept it that way, I was able to apply it in new ways and become a better person because of it. And I think Josiah did something like this. You know, Josiah was willing to hear something that was hard and was willing to apply it even though it was hard. So I hope that you can apply some of that too. If you hear somebody give you feedback, or if you ask for feedback, remember to just say thank you, no matter what it is. You encourage people to give you more feedback when you ask for it and when you receive it well. I think Josiah received feedback well, and I think we could all learn from that. Hope y'all have a great week. Thanks so much.